Perfect. Hi, everyone. I am Sean Cotter. I'm the executive director for Wicked Queer. I'm also co-curator of this program, Queer Lives, Our Stories, Our Lives. And I'm here with Jenny, who helped me out co-curate this.
Hello there.
So we're going to have everyone go, we're joined with several of the filmmakers of the program, so I'm going to have everyone go around, introduce themselves, and maybe give a brief sort of synopsis of their film. And I guess we can start with Jennifer.
Okay.
We'll do Brady Bunch style.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer Abod. I am the director and writer and producer, partly, of Nice Chinese Girls Don't, a poet's memoir with Kitty Sway. Kitty Sway is an Asian American lesbian feminist poet. She was the first poet, actually person, to have a book published by a lesbian, Asian lesbian in the United States. Kitty's a poet, and she's still very much so a poet. Her poetry is now actually in the Smithsonian, and she's got several manuscripts. But in any case, Nice Chinese Girls is about her life through her poems. That's why we called it a poetry memoir. And there's very few things that are like this. We were on a very low budget. So I filmed the entire thing in one day in her 2-bedroom apartment and had her change t-shirts for each poem so that we could have some variety. The film has gone all over the world, which is very exciting. It's only a 20-minute film. And it was originally done for a conference for old lesbians organizing for change. She was supposed to be the speaker. She was unable to come because of all the Trump shit and the airplanes and all that. She was afraid. So we made this thing in a couple of weeks. And then when people liked it, they threw some money at me, and I was able to create it and put it into a short, which is what's going on in the festivals these days. And so I'm proud of it. I'm glad it's my 4th film. Fortunately, all of my films will be with women, with Women Make Movies. And this is going to be picked up also by Women Make Movies. So when I die, all of my films will be in one fucking place.
Yay. So maybe Jen and David, if you can talk about Yellow Peril Queer Destiny.
Sure. Sorry, my name is Jen Sunshine. I'm the co-artistic director alongside David of Love Intersections, which is a Vancouver, BC, Canada based media arts organization that produces intergenerational and intersectional documentary film, specifically centering the stories of BIPOCs. BIPOCs who are queer and non-binary, trans, and two-spirit. And David and myself are located on the unceded and traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. And David, I'll let David do the synopsis.
It's also Pride Weekend here in Vancouver.
We're so late.
So we're a little bit hungover as well. Yeah. Yellow Peril Queer Destiny. It's an experimental short documentary about our friend, a drag artist named Made in China. And it uses the 5 elements in Chinese culture as a metaphor to explore our queer cultural identities. And it premiered last year at the Vancouver Queer Film Festival, and it's also been circulating into different film festivals across the world.
Awesome. Maybe Dan?
Hey everyone, my name is Dan Huntz. I live in Beacon, New York. I'm originally from Boston. My film is called Perfectly Frank, and it's a short documentary about aging in the gay community. And it focuses on, it's essentially a portrait of Frank Velarde, who is kind of a sassy old gent who's a retired accountant from Long Island. And he, after being married for nearly 50 years, came out when he was 65. And the rest of it, I'm not going to tell you.
Tune in for that.
Tune in for that, please.
So Clem, if you could talk maybe about Sylvie.
Yes, so it's
I guess it's a first-person documentary about a house that we squatted in south of France in Toulouse. We squatted it because the house had been empty for 5 years before that, because the former owner shot his wife to death and then shot himself too. And then it turned out that the people who squatted it were like this little queer community, and we moved in and lived there for 10 years. So I'm telling all this and my point of view about it, I guess.
And I wanted to pick you kind of last for that because I wanted to lead in, because I absolutely fell in love with your documentary, just because it's so mysterious. A whole story of Sylvie and her murder, and the sort of like the sort of queer collective that are squatting there, kind of trying to piece together this sort of like narrative of her life is so fascinating. Like I was just like completely riveted to your subject. Like, how did you kind of like come upon your subject? And I guess I'll kind of turn this question to everybody. Like, how did you pick your subject to sort of like focus your documentary on?
Well, for me, I think just when we discovered the house, and then we found little by little, by cleaning the house, because the house was a big mess before we moved in. So little by little, we found the letters that she would write to her husband. And so I think as soon as I was reading them, and I got obsessed with them, so I read them over. I think from that day, I wanted to tell her story, but then it just turned out that I stayed 9 years in this house, and just when I left, I decided that I really needed to do the film before I left the house. Yeah, and I guess also with the years, I think, and with like getting more and more of a feminist perspective, I think I had more clue of what I wanted to think about this story, because when you read the letter, you could think that they just had a like maybe very intense like S&M relationship, and that it ended up by him killing her. But really then myself like becoming, I guess, more, yeah, I guess just feminist, I just like realized that actually it's very common that the man usually like will kill his wife, and then his other belongings, like here, like either children or animals. And so, and then that often happens when the woman wants to leave the relationship. And so, yeah, so that's when I just figured out that that's actually like what really this story was about, I think. So I could have focused more on like seeing the story in a different way, but that's, yeah, eventually what I said about it.
Maybe Jen and David, if you could talk about like how you found your subjects and for your focus of your documentary.
Yeah, well, I remember Jen and I, when we first saw Made in China perform, I had never seen drag like that before. Kendall Yan, Made in China, her performance, well, first her name is Made in China. She literally wears her cultural identity on stage. I'd never seen something like that before. Never seen my culture represented in drag that way before. And her performances are really, really, really like moving, emotional, and really, really political. And so I think, you know, when the first time I saw Kendall perform, I was like, we have to do something with her.
Yeah, there's something really visceral about the way that Made in China just immerses the audience into just like how she experiences the world. It's very immersive, very unconventional. So what I think David and I appreciate about her is that she's so willing to go to the experimental and to the abstract, and she resides there. That's where her art lives. One of my, I suppose how I think we were just so inspired. And one of my favorite parts of the process was actually filming. It was like my fantasy wet dream come true. I have been dying to film with drones for like ever. And we found this like private, secluded like island, just like, I don't know, it was like a 2-hour drive from Vancouver into this like beautiful forest, and it was like by the ocean. So we're just like surrounded by water that we had to like canoe over. And so imagine like Kendall in this giant like ball gown that's like red, and then the color contrast is as she's like walking along the beach, and the contrast to like the water, and then we just have the drone. But it was just such an incredible experience. And that was something that David and I really wanted to experiment with through the Chinese 5 elements, starting with earth, which leads into fire, which leads into, wood.
Wood.
Oh my gosh, wood leads into fire, which leads into earth, then it leads into metal, and then ends on water. And there is this beautiful synergy and relationality that we wanted to evoke through Kendall and her relationship to the landscape. Yeah.
I mean, you really kind of portrayed that really well. Like your film is so gorgeous to look at, and bless that drone shot, because it really kind of draws you in. It's like so compelling with look at it. You're just sort of like, you're like, whoa, where am I going with this? And you're kind of really kind of sucked in. And Kendall's sort of performances outside and bringing that sort of outside element into the sort of like process of the storytelling is really kind of wonderful as well.
And some I should mention, some of the poems that are in there are written by Kendall as well, and the opening and closing poem is by my cousin Kai Cheng Tom, who her poem Diaspora Babies opens and closes the film. So it's the first time. So this is Jen and I started Love Intersections with like $50 out of a pitch in $50 each and favors from our friends. And it's this has been sort of the largest budget that we've been able to finally manage to fundraise for. And so we were able to sort of play around with a lot of these sort of more experimental elements. Yeah, it was really fun.
And I think that those kind of elements are not necessarily seen in a lot of documentaries. So I feel I applaud you for sort of taking those sort of risks and being sort of experimental. I mean, I come from an experimental film background myself. So I always, I also love documentaries. So when I see the sort of like the synergy of those sort of that sort of experimental sort of touch to it into something that is very formal, like a documentary, it just makes it all very new and also very queer, which, obviously is why we're here. Maybe Jen, you can talk about how you found Frank and the sort of process of casting him and kind of developing his story.
Sean, did you say Dan?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, it blipped. I didn't find Frank. Frank found me. I'd finished a feature-length document. I usually do features. And I had spent a couple of years with a family in Connecticut. They have 2 kids, and both kids are transgender. So it's a film called Little Miss Westie. We'd spent years working on that, and it went through the film festival circuit and just released on PBS recently. And I'd sworn off making films. I'd said, that's enough. I'm going to give up. I'm not doing this anymore. Like, I can't raise money. I've got to like focus on my partner. I've got to like stop doing this. So then fast forward, and I'm in Fort Lauderdale going to get a piece of pizza or something. It was a Sunday afternoon. And I walked by this club called Hunters. It's actually Wilton Manors, for those of you who know the area. And the place is rocking out, and it's like a Sunday afternoon. So I'm like, oh, okay, the pizza can wait. I'm going to go in there and see what's going on. And I walked into the bar, and the bartenders, the bar backs, men and women, were the most gorgeous, muscled, beautiful 20-something-year-old people, like really, really, really stunningly beautiful people. I'm like, wow, damn. So I'm walking along the bar, and then I see a sign there's a sign, like a glowing sign that says Go-Go or Go-Go Boys or something like that. So it occurs to me, I'm like, well, if the bartenders are this amazing, they look like Xena warrior princess and like whatever, like these hot, beautiful men, like imagine what the Go-Go Boys are. So I walk around the corner, and I go into like, there's a big dance floor. I'm not much of a bar person. So it's like, I'm kind of cutting through the people dancing. And I look up on the go-go area, and there's Frank. So those of you, if you haven't seen the film, Frank is nearly 80 years old. And the reason why I made the film was my reaction. That I had kind of a really complex reaction. I immediately kind of laughed, and then I felt really shitty about laughing, and then I got really emotional. And it was really, yeah, it was a really, really moving experience, because I was like, why shouldn't he be the go-go boy? And more importantly, I realized about our community is, thank freaking God that we have this queer community that has a space for Frank to be, where he's completely celebrated. So I had to make the film. So I was like, it's like giving up carbs. I'm never going to give up carbs ever. I'm never going to eat pizza. I'll probably make another film too. So that's what it was. And originally I thought, I just wanted to try to capture this kind of complex reaction that I had, which is why in the film you don't realize that he's going to dance until the end. Because I want people to either laugh and then feel crappy about it, or whatever, have kind of just an uneasy feeling. And then I started spending time with him, and it blew me away. I mean, he's like this walking stereotype of an straight Italian Long Island guy. Like, forget about it. He's just this amazing, and I just love him. So that's kind of that story. It's a little bit of a long story.
It's a good story, though. Jennifer, maybe you can talk about meeting Ki Sui and your reasoning for kind of creating this wonderful portrait of her.
Well, when I went to this conference, Old Lesbians Organizing for Change, and I need to say that again because really there are old lesbians and we have sex. It's just very important for people to realize that, because you have, silver beavers and whatever it is. I mean, you really have to understand that our community is rather ageist, as well as, other. And that experience goes. So when I met Kitty at the Old Lesbians Organizing for Change conference, we discovered that we lived 3 blocks away from each other. And we had been living 3 blocks away from each other for 4 years. Wow. So after the conference was over with, we became friends. And I'm a poet too. I write poetry. And I got to know Kitty. And for about a year, and she's an archivist. She had collected all of this material and photographs and, things about her grandmother and photographs about herself. And she had such a vast career. I mean, a bodybuilder, she was into things that feminists were not happy to have her be into for a while. And she was a very good poet. And she spoke about, and I've always, my films have been about issues about race. I did the second film about Audre Lorde. It was called, what was it called? Anyhow, The Edge of Each Other's Battles, The Vision of Audre Lorde. And I did a film about my partner, Angela Bowen, her paintings back there, The Passionate Pursuits of Angela Bowen. And I did a film, Look Us in the Eye, The Old Women's Project. So my projects have always been about isms because I needed to learn about the isms that I was filming. And Asian lesbians was something, I don't think I had ever been a friend with an Asian lesbian before, and realized that what she had to say was unique and different, but she was also part of the feminist community that I was building and part of, changing the culture in San Francisco, trying to get ethnic studies programs going in San Francisco. And so I knew that it was historic. And I swore that I was never going to do another film again also because it's really hard. Money, time, children, relationships, PhDs, shit like that get in the way, and it's hard. It's really hard. And then I just said, okay, one more. And this is it. And so I'm glad it's around. I think that if the time has come, I think that people are much more aware now of racism and how Asians fit into that and also don't fit into that. So it feels like the right time for the film to have emerged and on a lot of levels. And I'm hoping that it really brings up issues not only about racism, but really about ageism and how we grow old together as community and how the splits with generations is a waste. Just as it is as the rest of the divisions. We will not get stronger if we're separated. And so I hope those conversations take place.
Me too, quite honestly. And I remember when Jenny, when Kitty was on the cover of On Our Backs because I was living in Northampton, and I have to say most of my friends were lesbians, and they were all sort of like, whoa, this is crazy, this is amazing, and completely sexy photos, like, and that was like sort of unheard of in that magazine, to sort of feature a woman of color on the cover. And that's just like, still groundbreaking in many ways, which is unfortunate, but still something to note. I'm gonna let Jenny sort of ask some questions because I've been hogging the mic. So.
Yeah, I just had one question I want to ask folks. So I guess in the documentary process, usually you don't necessarily plan everything that happens. So I just wanted to ask folks, was there some aspect of your documentary or some aspect of the person or group that you're covering that actually wasn't what you expected, but you actually did like how it turned out in your final film?
Yeah, I can go. There was one storyline that was the hardest to edit, actually, was when we did the chapter opening for Metal, which featured a non-binary lion dancers, which was quite groundbreaking in Vancouver, because a lot of the martial arts studios don't teach lion dance to women or non-binary people. And so when we met Dora and discovered that the work that they were doing in the community to teach people of all genders lion dance, we knew we had to feature that somehow in the film. And we only discovered the storyline when we hired them to do the lion dance. So yeah, that was sort of a story that was that we didn't plan for. There was another element of that story that we also didn't plan for, and it was the storyline with Kimberly, that where they got called out. So Kimberly took a lion dance costume with permission from a studio to one of Made in China's drag performances, and she got called out on social media by someone from a martial arts studio saying, "Do you even know how to do it? It took me 20 years to be able to hold a lion head." And that was a really tricky storyline for us to edit, because we wanted to honor his story too, the guy that called her out, and to open up that complexity of the sort of policing that happens internally within racialized communities, and that those sorts of pressure about what is authentic and what isn't. Like, that sort of complexity was really hard for us to put into the film, because we didn't want to demonize him neither. It's sort of the sort of complex relationships that are within communities that we wanted to sort of uphold.
Yeah, I thought that was a very powerful point. So I'm really glad you guys did incorporate it.
Anybody else want to respond to Jenny's question?
I guess me.
Go for it.
I guess for me, because I had such a strong material, like with the letters, the photos of Sylvie's, and just my surrounding, that was the one I was living in for 9 years. So I don't think anything was, I knew what I was going to get. But then what happened is more after, when I finished the film, is when I got a court date for an eviction, and they were asking for me for, they were threatening me with, like, I don't know how, like 30,000 euros for squatting the house. And so my strategy with the lawyer was to say the house had never existed, like we never occupied it. And so meanwhile, I was just finishing the film, I was erasing every trace of what we had been doing for 10 years on the internet. So I was doing this like invisibility operation while I was finishing that film that I wanted to show. So this was like a little crazy, but yeah, I guess that was maybe what was surprising about, finishing that film in that moment. Did
you get in trouble? Has anybody seen it?
So the court was postponed all the time because of COVID and stuff like that. So now we finally, just like a few weeks ago, got the final answer, and they're letting me go with nothing. Just the house is empty now, and we just left them. That's it. So yeah, good.
That's a good story. Maybe Jennifer, if you could respond, maybe to Jenny's question.
Something that was surprising that I had encountered doing it. Well, Kitty had a terrible memory, really bad memory. And we had a very short window to make this film for the conference. So there was no way I could just interview her and then go through it and figure out what the best thing was. So I wrote the script. And I had to write the script because I knew her story. And she was, you know, I needed to do, knowing who she was, I needed to do that. And it was a little bold and of me to write her story. And I was pleased that that she approved of it and that she trusted it. And then she made a few changes, which was really good. But because it was so, we had to do it in one day, you know, for $500 or whatever it was, that it really had to be very thought out. But I remember when I asked her to lie on the couch and read this poem for Breathless, because we just had this little apartment. There was nothing. So I had to make her go up and down and, you know, sideways, whatever it was. And so I made her lie on the couch to read this poem, Breathless. And she agreed to do it. And I think it kind of is very cool. So.
Yeah, I think that the film actually does manage to go through a lot of topics and be quite dynamic, despite, like you say, there being a lot of limitations in the filmmaking process.
Lots and lots of limitations. So you just have to be, you know, as creative as possible. So it was fun. I think the other limitation I had is that my wife was suffering with Alzheimer's, and I was her caregiver at the time. And so it was on the one hand, it was there was not only a time pressure to do it, but to do the film in the context of this other thing that was going on with me. It was very difficult, and it took me about a year after the conference to actually come back to it and then make it to what it is right now. You know, it was really difficult. I mean, we go through stuff while we're making our films. We have our lives, you know. So I hope we get a chance to ask questions of the other filmmakers, because I have questions.
That's coming along.
All right.
One thing I wanted to point to is, like, I'm amazed that it was only shot in a day. That's crazy, and good for you for bringing out all of Kitty's amazing T-shirt collection, because I was living nostalgic through the March on Washington in 1993, the Safe Sex is Hot Sex T-shirts. Those were all like. I'm 51, so I'm like, those are a lot of sort of when I was just coming out and becoming politically active, a lot of those sort of signifiers and sort of like graphics and stuff like that were all around me. So I was like, wow, that's kind of amazing. So good on you for.
I'm glad.
Bringing a little more history into it.
Yeah, what people would think about that, you know, but we had to do something, and she cooperated, which was really wonderful. So
Dan, maybe answer Jenny's question.
Yeah. Again, when I embarked on this film, I thought it was going to be 4 minutes. I really thought it was going to be a really, really short piece. And I mean, I knew that he had Frank had he's kind of estranged from his ex-wife. They had a really horrible divorce. I mean, it was ugly, ugly, ugly. And so I never thought, I knew, of course, I was going to ask if I could interview someone from his family or his ex-wife, but I never thought she would agree to. And then for some reason, he was going up to Long Island to spend some time with his son, and he was going to stay with his ex-wife. And I just threw it out there, and she was just like, sure, we'll let you come down tomorrow. So I think to me, that was the thing that really, really surprised. Like, it really, I think that her as an addition to the story just gave the piece so much depth. And also, I mean, she is a remarkable woman and a really strong woman. So how much do you put in? Because a lot of time you're like, wow, that story might be more interesting than Frank's story. So it's like kind of balancing that out. But that to me was surprise. And again, I've been doing documentary for a really long time, and you always go into it thinking, I'm going to tell this story, but then you're dealing with families and things happen. And a few films ago, I made a film about Buck Angel, who's a trans activist and a porn star, and I thought it was going to be this really edgy, really confrontational, queer, sex positive thing. And I started asking him, trying to talk to his family. And he was really, really guarded about it. And then I started talking to the family, and then they were really guarded with me. And then all of a sudden at one point, they really vetted me. And at one point, the parents decided that they would sit down for the interview. And bam, that one interview, the entire story shifted. It came from being like this like queer activist portrait to being this like father-son story. So to me, that's always the magic of immersing yourself in a person's life. And you just have to be able to listen and go with it, which sometimes is really, really hard. But it was amazing that Lucia was like, sure. And she made spaghetti and meatballs for me, which was remarkable.
Yeah, that scene in the dining table interview, that is just quite something. Yeah, incredible.
And she didn't, she was just like, please don't bring too any people with you. Just, come, we'll have dinner, we'll have whatever. And so I'm literally like, holding the camera, and I'm, I haven't shot for a really long time. So I'm holding the camera, with the plate of spaghetti in the other hand. And, but again, I mean, it's, when people just surprise me. It's just remarkable.
Yeah, it was great. And the use of the home movie footage of like weddings and them dancing and stuff like that was so wonderful and so lovely, and it kind of really underlined their sort of like commitment and their sort of like to each other as well, which was kind of nice. So I'll open it up to questions for each other, because I love that. Who wants to go first? Jennifer, since you had some questions, you want to go?
I wanted to ask Clem. I think one of the things when I saw your film was that, I've never seen anything like that, obviously. I don't think too many people have. But what really shocked me, and also, I don't know, I can't tell you what my feelings were, but all these young people, women and men, and they were all hanging out together in the pool, and there were gay guys and lesbians being together comfortably with each other. And that, I wanted you to talk a little bit about that living situation, because for me to see that, it wasn't just the mystery and everybody kind of getting involved in the mystery. They were all, you were obsessed, but they were in it too. And it was kind of like the relationship. What was that relationship like? I mean, about the people, and do you still have relations with them, or did they become friends, or I'm just kind of curious about that community that was created there. And of people who were kind of like outcasts and didn't have money, I think it was, and had difficulty living. And so that part of it was really, I wanted know more about that.
Yeah, thank you for asking this. Well, I guess our little community in Toulouse has been built over the years, but it's very inclusive in terms of like different like queernesses, I would say. Like, so yeah, there is trans people, there is lesbians and gays, and we are all together. But I think in this house specifically, there is a very common, precarious lives situation, and we see it a little bit in the film. We see some people struggling with documentation, because they have a history of migration, and other people, I don't know. Sometimes I think it's also some precarity that is like chosen, but also partly chosen, partly not. For me, I guess, and yes, they're all very close friends of mine, because we all live together, and the house is actually not big, so we are just like, it's a very very tight communal living situation, I would say. And yes, I think also because we weren't paying rent because we were squatting, so it allowed some people to access to that space that were people who either couldn't work or didn't have to work for this time when they stayed there. So it also gave us a lot of freedom to just hang out there and just, yeah.
Yeah, you all seem very comfortable with each other, you know, cross sexualities, you know, yeah, so that in and of itself was something that I hadn't really seen before. The swimming pool scene in particular was.
Yes, yes. Mm.
Oh, in my dip in the pool right now. So were the I guess I have a question too for Clem too. Now, everyone seemed a little haunted by the sort of the murder of Sylvie by her husband. Were there actual ghosts?
I guess that's, well, I guess for me, because I'm the one who cleaned all the blood from the room, and I feel I'm like really not somebody who like feels those things. So I happily stayed living in that room for 9 years and never felt anything weird. But then when I tell people the story, of course, there are some people who say, oh yes, I feel the vibes. I guess that's also something I used in my story with like talking about the ghosts and making the people in the house talk about the ghosts. But I think really on a day-to-day basis, people are just really focused on what they are living, and they don't really make connections with the story of what happened in the house before, especially the one who arrived later, because there was no trace at all of what happened before, besides the car that's still in the yard, where you can see actually the bullet hole in the roof. But otherwise it was just like the house. So that's me like telling the story and making them speak about the ghost. So maybe some people will say they've met the ghost, but I haven't.
I also thought it was really interesting too in the car where the rifle shot it was cut out and put into the car, so it kind of stayed in the same space, but then there was plants growing out of it. So there was this whole cycle of rebirth and growth coming out of something so ghastly. And I love that sort of imagery of this sort of like rebirth and reborn. I feel as queer people, we always are trying to reinvent ourselves and become sort of reborn and re-envision ourselves in other people's perspectives. So I love that imagery.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just for David and Jen, can you guys talk about your production process? Like, what did you guys shoot on? It's so pretty. The editing process, I'd love to know.
Yeah, so we got a StoryHive grant. So it's a StoryHive is it's actually a telecommunications company that they give out film grants, and they're, in my opinion, actually the most progressive funder in Canada right now. They'll actually even fund 100% of your film budget, which Canada Council for the Arts, for example, you have to patch together funding, right?
That's
so
great.
Yeah, so that was really liberating, if you will. And then, yeah, Jen and I, so our filmmaking process is we always do things in collaboration with the film subject, if you will. And so Kendall is actually a co-director on the film.
Nice.
And so, yeah, and so we sort of seeded sort of 5 different scenes that we knew we wanted to shoot. And paired Kendall with different people in her life. And yeah, and then just kind of took it from there. Yeah, and as we mentioned, you know, the chapter openings are quite experimental. Some of them we had like very deep meanings to them, or that we wanted to convey. But like other ones, like my favorite one is we just had this idea inspired by Beyonce's Formation music video, where we just wanted Kendall being driven around in a rickshaw by a white guy with smoke bombs, you know, hanging off the side of this rickshaw. You know, it was that was just the genesis of that. So some of it's more inspired. Like, you know, we have that another scene where we did an ancestral veneration ceremony at the site of the gathering site of the anti-Oriental riots in 1907. So those, you know, there was some of them are a little bit more serious, but other ones are just, you know, inspired by Beyonce.
I mean, I love that sort of the memorial sort of like moment that you have. It's like so beautiful walking up being trying to walk upstairs, and even the point where there's like all these autumn leaves kind of blowing around because you see the sort of the fallen, the sort of like that in the bottom of her wig is like the leaves are there, and it's just it's so, like it's so beautiful and poetic.
Thank you.
Absolutely adored it.
Yeah, and you know, I'll to talk maybe a little bit more about that scene. One of the things when we originally shot that scene, we knew that we wanted to sort of pay homage to our queer ancestral elders or our ancestors that came before us, but we also realized in the editing piece that sort of idea of ancestors in the past didn't also tell the whole story, especially in Chinese culture, because we believe we carry our ancestors with us. And so we actually wanted to sort of collapse that sort of linear temporal assumption of temporality, if you will. And so that's why the film isn't sort of not very linear. It's sort of in these sort of little snippets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know, Jen, if you want to add something about that.
No, I feel like you did a really good job describing it. I would say that for us, it's always been about relationships and relationship building. And so when we're working in such close proximity and collaboration with people, there are moments when, you know, you think that you disagree on a creative vision, but that in fact, when we're like in the moment, I sometimes like step back. It's almost as if I'm like a ghost watching myself or watching this moment. And I realize that like creativity doesn't belong to me. Like the creativity and the vision actually emerges really authentically and organically in the process of filmmaking and art itself. Like it's in that moment. So a lot of the things that just like, you think they're like planned, and yeah, we do a lot of like production around. So Dan, I love that question, but it's also like, I don't know how to answer that question because so much of it is such a fluke. And, you know, I often think, my gosh, I still have imposter syndrome even in my 30s, and I don't think it's ever going to go away. So I often have to remind myself that, yeah, actually, I think I know what I'm doing, but a lot of times it just feels so accidental, you know, like the art that just happens is so accidental. So
yeah, I'll also mention on that line, we had the opportunity to turn the film actually into a visual art exhibit at the Sum Gallery, which is Canada's only art gallery with a queer mandate. And Jen and I, the entire time, were like, wait, I'm not a visual artist. We make films. We have no idea what we're doing. And here we are, like making all of the, you know, all these, putting all of this shit on the wall, you know? So we definitely felt like we had, imposter syndrome. And it was also, I'll also just mention, it was also an interesting time to, you know, have this film come out and also the exhibit, because we also saw a really big spike and some galleries in Chinatown, there's a really big spike of anti-Asian racism and hate crimes in Chinatown in Vancouver, as is elsewhere in the world. So it was also, so we were also able to have like dialogues about what does it mean to have a exhibit called Yellow Peril, the Celestial Elements, in a time when the Yellow Peril narratives, the xenophobic Yellow Peril narratives were coming back, right, because of COVID. So it was an interesting time to have that dialogue in the community.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you having that, because I feel like that's it's important to have representation of the entire community, because it's important for us all to sort of like really kind of celebrate the sort of richness and the diversity of the queer community. And it's important to make sure that all the stories are magnified and sort of told. And I really hope no imposters celebrate the magic of the serendipity of the process. and that's what it really is. It's sort of magical, sort of when things all kind of like come together in that sort of way. So, you know, the universe will speak how it is and give you exactly what you want and need. So, so just kind of like maybe to because we're almost been chatting for an hour, which is kind of great. I guess my question maybe for everybody is, you know, we are in unprecedented times right now with the pandemic and stuff like that. How has that sort of affected your sort of art making, your filmmaking, your brainstorming for next projects, and what is actually next for your current films that we're celebrating now and projects for the future. And whoever wants to start can.
I can go.
All right, go Dan.
Yeah. I'm a professor, so I teach filmmaking at Marymount Manhattan College. So I've been, during this period, it took so much energy to just rally the students. It was very easy to just focus on them. I'm really struggling creatively right now. I'm also a potter, and it's just last week was the first time I sat down at my wheel in the past 5 months. So I think it's been really, really difficult. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think I had vowed that I wouldn't make another film, and then I did. I'm still kind of holding to that. As I'm getting older, I'm really interested in helping people make their films. So, and I don't know what, in whatever capacity, you know. So my last film was about a family, but it was really about queer themes, because 2 kids, both transgender. And moving forward, I would much rather, you know, help a trans filmmaker make that film. So I think that's what I'm gonna be looking for more, is more like executive producing or consulting, or just like, hey, you want me to hold the boom pole? Like, I don't, you know, I'm a team player. So yeah, so I'm really looking for more supportive roles moving forward.
Well, it's important. I feel like the mentorship, especially of the generation, you know, I feel like that's a good thing. It's like empower people to tell the stories.
It's really important. And also, I do programming as well, so I've been kind of moving more toward, I work for Tribeca, and I've been doing that increasingly. And again, I really love that. I mean, that ability to just allow to like look through all this amazing work and put things together is really, it's a true gift.
Are there any, like, Dan, are there any intergenerational filmmaking programs where you are?
You know, there's a queer mentorship opportunity in New York City.
Yeah.
And it's funny, someone on faculty with me participated in that last year, and I probably should do that. But I mean, I teach full time, so I'm doing a lot of that. And also the school that I teach at, it's like gay pride every day. It's a really progressive school. So I kind of get that kind of baked in.
Yeah.
But you're right, I really should, because there are some, like, you know, just like the Stonewall, I think Stonewall Community Foundation does something.
Yeah, yeah. David and I, we co-facilitate with the Queer Film Festival and Real Youth here, REEL. And so the program's called Troublemakers, all caps. And the Troublemakers are the queer elders, of course. And we pair like 10 to 15 LGBTQ2S youth with 10 elders, and each like youth team make a film about each elder. Okay. And so there's just this like beautiful like relationship building, but also really it's about like addressing some of the like the loss of queer history, as you know, and because we're not capturing that, right? And so I just wonder, there's got to be programs out there, especially in New York.
Yeah, definitely. There's a couple, but we definitely could do more.
Yeah. Thanks.
Who wants to go next? Maybe Jen, since you're chatting, what's next for you and for David?
Oh gosh, the quarantine has been so lonely. It's been so lonely, and I just think that everyone who was very productive and baking bread and making art, I think they're lying, because we perform. I think we perform a certain kind of like productivity, especially on mediated spaces like online. I just don't buy it, because it's been really challenging for David and myself too to be creative. Even though you seemingly have more time on your hands, time just becomes, every day is Blur's day. So I don't really know how to answer that question. Maybe David can help, because I feel like we have some project coming up.
Yeah. Oh, Jen, you're being very modest. We're very busy. So Jen and I also co-founded, along with 16 other artists, the Vancouver Artists Labor Union Cooperative, and also we established the Artists and Cultural Workers Union. And so we're doing a lot of labor organizing right now to try to end the exploitation of artists. So that's been very busy because we started it in January, and you can imagine we opened a print studio, a unionized print studio in Chinatown, and trying to keep that business afloat during a pandemic, it is very challenging. But
and navigating difficult personalities, because we're
yes,
artists, and artists are quirky, and we have big personality.
But Paul Wong, who's a Canadian artist, he's curating Pride in Chinatown installations, and so we have a vinyl going up in our window in Chinatown that makes reference to a bathhouse for Chinese laborers that built the railroad in Chinatown. So that's going up on Friday. I'm also in the middle of my comprehensive exams for my PhD, so I unfortunately haven't even seen any of the films right now because I'm writing essays every day. But that's what's preoccupying my brain right now.
David and I joke all the time that between us, there's like 4 now women's studies degrees.
5.
5. Or social justice related degree.
You can never have too many degrees, like really.
No.
And I'm baking bread currently, so I've got
what?
I've got dough rising on my in my kitchen right now. So
amazing.
So maybe Jennifer, could you maybe talk about your sort of like?
Okay. Well, I'm 74, so I've got you all beat, and and I'm still cooking. So not food, but yeah, this is it's been a difficult time. My wife died 2 years ago, so I was in grieving mode before pandemic hit. And I had surgery. So it's like when I was finally recovered from the surgery, I thought, okay, I'm gonna finally get out. And then I was stuck in. So anyway, so what I decided to do was, I love poetry, and I've been writing poetry, and I'm part of several poetry things, and I started my own poetry group, which is Poetry with Friends. These are really good poets, and so my expression of everything works right now. It doesn't cost anything. I can do it at the kitchen table, and I am taking a class on editing video and in cell phones. It's the Ollie thing, when you get old and you can take these things for $35. And so I'm learning that I don't like it that much. Have worked on, Final Cut, but on the other hand, it also means that I'm also concentrating on archives. Angela Bowen, Dr. Angela Bowen, was a contemporary of Audre Lorde, so I knew, in early feminism, I knew everybody, including Audre Lorde and Adrienne Rich and Angela Bowen, and I'm working on Dr. Angela Bowen's archives. It's going to be part of a Journal for International Studies, and it's going to be an online journal just devoted to her work, her life, her activism, her scholarship, and I'm doing that with Spelman College and 3 other scholars. So I'm not alone in that, and that's also, it's very emotional for me, and I'm also working on my own archives because I've done a lot of stuff. I was in the New Haven Women's Liberation Rock Band in 1970, and I was a first woman broadcaster in the state of Connecticut with my own talk show. And so I'm kind of beginning to tell my own story, which I haven't done because I've told everybody else's story. And now all of a sudden, I'm concentrating a little bit on me a little bit. So I don't know what's going to happen with that cell phone, technology stuff. I don't really know if that's going to be anything that I'm going to do ever again. I like to take photographs. I don't know if video ever again is going to be really in my future. A documentary, I really have no idea, because I don't know. And I was in the middle of a video project called Dance With Me about a lesbian who was for the first time going to be involved in international competition because they had just passed a rule in the US that allows for same-sex couples to dance competitively. And so I had started this film called Dance With Me about her thing, a big woman. Whew. And she was a beautiful dancer and her story was great. And it was impossible. I mean, how do you do that? Nobody's dancing now. So we started they were going to be going to these balls and competitions and we were going to do it and everything. Nobody's dancing anymore. So there's no story. And so I had to stop, and that was going to probably, and I thought, look at that, that is definitely going to be my last film. So, thank you, Dan. And so I'm 74. So I'm thinking, okay, maybe I'll have another 10, 12 years or something like that. So I've kind of got to think about the past as well as the future in terms of what that means. It's a different stage of life. And I'm trying to grasp it and accept it and be realistic about it too. So I'm very, very excited to meet you all and to see the young filmmakers before me whose work you get to work, because I want to see your work. It's really good. It's so experimental. It's very freeing. The confines of the Ken Burns effect, forget about it. Keep going with all what you're saying and what you're feeling and expressing. It's exciting as hell, and I'm pleased to be at least one more of these conversations to have met all of you, and so yeah.
I have a feeling it's not going to be your last one.
Ah.
And I want to see that documentary about yourself because that sounds really damn fascinating.
He has agreed to play my other films, which have not, when I made my films, they weren't interested in Black women, okay? My films are about Black women's lives and politics, and people weren't that interested, okay? Now they seem to be interested, and so they're award-winning, but to have life again is very exciting because their stuff is timeless and timely, what they're saying, so.
Maybe Clem, if you want to bring us home with what's next for you and how are you surviving the pandemic?
Well, I think here in France, we're quite lucky with how our government is helping us going through with it, even though we can say things, but when I see how it's going in the US, I guess I feel lucky about it. For me, I guess I don't have any fixed project yet. I think also a lot because my inspirations come from a lot of my community, but also it's this and me being able to write by myself. And this is a very hard work, I think, to do, writing. So I need to find time to write. Right now I'm more focused on going to the beach in Marseille where I live now. So we'll see. Sorry.
Totally fair and valid. I'm actually looking forward to a beach day myself. Hopefully soon after the festival.
Hopefully.
Any last words to our Wicked Queer audience from our filmmakers at all? Yes,
support virtual film festivals. Tell your friends. Tell your friends that this is exciting new work and that you don't want to miss it. These people are the future and you can be part of it. So support it.
Yay, I love that. So to wrap it up, I want to thank all of our filmmakers and creators of this program. It's called Queer Lives, Our Stories, Our Lives. Still available till 11 p.m. tonight on our Zerb TV platform. Wicked Queer is a all-volunteer organization. We depend on your support and your participation, and we love that you're there. If you want to find out more information about getting involved or donating, wickedqueer.org, and we would love to have you. thank you guys again for spending time on this nice Sunday afternoon with me. And thank you so much for your documents, because that is amazing.
Yeah, really powerful work. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean and Jenny, for facilitating.
Oh, you're welcome. Welcome. So, good day all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.